Envy, desire, and ambition limit a man to the universe of Maya. And what is that universe? It is only the projection of his envy, his desire, and his ambition. Noah Arkwright, The Wisdom of Amal. "What folly," the abbot said. "You deliberately told your friend to set the mob on him, and after I expressly forbade it. Ah, McCrithy." McCrithy stood bent-shouldered in the abbot's study. The abbot sat in the lotus posture on a low table facing the priest, 2 fingers upraised in antennae position, knobby knees protruding where he bent across them. The abbot stared fixedly at McCrithy. "I was only thinking of you," McCrithy protested. "You did not think at all." The abbot was terrible in his quietly pained judgment. "You did not think of the human beings who were turned into a mob. Orn could have cast them into eternal hell. He might still do it when he comes into his full powers." "I came to warn you as soon as I knew he had escaped," McCrithy said. "Of what use is this warning?" the abbot asked. "Ah, my dear friend, how could you have fallen into such error? You see, what is happening right now is the easily predictable consequence of your actions. I can only surmise that this situation is what you really wanted." "Oh, no!" McCrithy was horrified. "When mouth and action disagree, believe action," the abbot said. "Why do you want to destroy us, McCrithy?" I don't. McCrithy backed away from the abbot, made fending motions with both hands. He stopped when his back encountered the wall. "But you do," the abbot said, his voice sorrowful. "Perhaps it's because I assigned Bakrish to Orn, and not you. I know it was an assignment you wanted. But it could not be, my friend. You would have sought to destroy Orn, and yourself. I could not permit that." McCrithy buried his face in his hands. "He'll destroy us all," he sobbed. "Pray he doesn't," the abbot said, his voice soft. "Send him your love and your concern for him. Thus, he may come to a fortunate awakening." "What good is love now?" McCrithy demanded. "He's coming for you." "Of course," the abbot murmured, "because I summoned him. Take your violence away now, McCrithy. Pray for yourself. Pray for a cleansing of your spirit. I too will pray for that." McCrithy shook his round head from side to side. "It's too late for prayer." "That you should say such a thing," the abbot mourned. Forgive me, McCrithy pleaded. "Take my blessing and go," the abbot said. "Ask the forgiveness of the god Orn as well. You may have caused him great hurt." Worldly use of power can destroy an angel. This is the lesson of peace. Loving peace and pursuing peace are not enough. One must also love one's fellows. Thus one learns the dynamic and loving conflict which we call life. Noah Arkwright, The Wisdom of Amal. Orn strode down a narrow street in the heart of the religious warren. He hugged the wall and avoided lights, but not with furtive motions. The priest's robe hung loosely on him and a little long. He tucked a fold under his belt, hoped someone would find the priest. But not too soon. The man lay bound and gagged with strips torn from his own underclothing beneath bushes in the park. Now, to find the abbot, Orn thought. Keeping his stride even and calm, he crossed an alley. A sour smell of old cooking tainted the narrow passage. The slap-slap of Orn's sandaled feet made a double echo off stone walls. Light poured from another alley directly ahead of him. Orn heard voices. He stopped as shadows were projected out of the alley and across the intersection. Two priests came into view. They were slender, blond, and benign. Both turned toward Orn. "May your God grant you peace," Orn said. The pair stopped, faces in shadows now, the light behind them. The one on the left said, "I pray you follow the path of divine guidance." The other said, "If you live in interesting times, I pray the fact causes you no alarm." He coughed, then, "May we serve you?" "I have been summoned to the abbot," Orn said. "I seem to have lost my way." He waited, alert for any movement from this pair. "These alleys are a maze," the priest on the left said. "But you are near." He turned, throwing a long, hooked nose into profile against the light. "Take this next turning to your right. Follow that way until the third turning on your left. That way ends at the court of the abbot. You cannot miss it." "I am grateful," Orn murmured. The priest who had given directions turned back to Orn, said, "We feel your great power, Blessed One. Pray, give us your benediction." "You have my blessing," Orn said, and meant it. The two straightened abruptly, then bowed low. Still bowing, the one on the right asked, "Will you be the new abbot, Blessed One?" Orn put down a sense of shock, said, "Is it wise to speculate on such matters?" The pair straightened, backed away. In unison they said, "We meant no harm. Forgive us." "Of course," Orn said. "Thank you for directing me." "A service to one's fellows is a service to God," they said. "May you find wisdom." There was a curious echoing quality to their voices, one slightly out of step with the other. Again they bowed, then scurried around Orn and hurried on their way. Orn stared after them until they were lost in darkness. Curious, he thought. What was that all about? But he knew how to find the abbot now. It is not necessarily loving kindness to build a fence around your master. How then can he observe his servants and see that they minister to him without thought of reward? No, my son, a fence is often a work of fear and a container for dust. Sayings of the Abbots. The street of the abbot proved to be even narrower than the others. Orn strode down it, observing that he could stretch out both arms and touch the opposed walls. They were rough stone illuminated by widely spaced glow globes of an ancient design, all black plasteel curlicues around the globes. A door glowed dimly gray at the end of the alley. The area smelled of newly turned earth and fungus. The plastrete surface underfoot was dish-marked with the passage of feet. The abbot's door proved to be locked. Orn thought, a locked door? Can all be sweetness and purity on Amal? He stepped back, peered up at the wall. Dark irregularities atop it suggested spikes or a similar barrier. Orn's thoughts turned cynical. Such civilized appointments on this peaceful planet. There was violence in this place beyond the ravening of mobs. Narrow alleys were easy to defend. Men who knew how to give sharp orders knew how to give military orders. The trappings of sigh and a constant harping on peace betrayed a concern with massive violence. A concern with war. Orn glanced back up the alley. It remained empty. He sensed the urgency of the fear within him. A dead-end street could live up to its label. He wanted to leave this place as fast as his feet would take him. This thought brought him no relief from the internal signal. One place was as dangerous as another on this planet. There was no way out of it except to plunge through the danger. He took a deep breath, shed the priestly robe, swung a hemmed corner up onto the wall, pulled. The robe slipped, caught. He tested it, heard a small tearing sound, but the fabric held. Orn tried his weight on it. The robe stretched, but remained firmly caught atop the wall. Scrabbling sounds marked his passage up the stones. He avoided sharp spikes at the top, crouched there to survey his surroundings. One window on the top floor of the two-story building opposite him glowed with a dim rose light behind loose draperies. Orn glanced down, saw a courtyard, tall pots in rows topped with flowering bushes. He glanced once more at the lighted window, felt the abrupt stab of rejection. Danger there. An air of tension filled the courtyard. The shadows could hold an army of guards, but an inner sense told him the danger lay in some other source. Behind that window. Orn freed the robe from the spike, dropped into the courtyard, crouched in shadows while he slipped back into the garment. Fastening the belt, he worked his way around the yard to the left, avoided the pots, hugged the shadows. Vines dropped from a balcony below the lighted window. He tested one, and it came away in his hands. Too fragile. He moved farther along the wall of the house. A draft fanned his left cheek. He paused, peered into darker blackness. An open doorway. Warning fear tingled along his nerves. He put it down, slipped through the doorway into a stairwell. Light flared in the stairwell. Orn froze, then suppressed laughter as he saw the beam switch beside the doorway. He stepped backward. Darkness. Forward. Light. The stairs climbed in a curve to the left. Orn moved up them, drifting silently, found a door at the top with a single golden initial. A. The abbot? The door handle was a simple short bar on a pivot. No palm code lock or other device. Anyone could open it. Orn felt the dryness of his throat as he put a hand to the short bar, depressed it. A final click sounded. Orn threw the door open, lunged through, and slammed it behind him. "Ah, I have been expecting you." It was a faintly tenor masculine voice with an edge of quavering to it. Orn slewed around, saw a wide hooded bed. Remote in the bed, like a dark-skinned doll, sat a man in a white nightshirt. He lay propped against a mound of pillows, the face faintly familiar. It was narrow, and with a nose like a precipice over a wide mouth. The polished, dark baldness of the head gleamed in the faint light of a single glow globe beside the bed. The wide mouth moved, and the faintly quavering tenor voice said, "I am the Abbot Halmerek. I welcome you and bless you." An odor of age and dust dominated the room. Orn heard an ancient timepiece ticking somewhere in the shadows. He took 2 steps toward the figure in the bed. His prescient sense increased its warning pressure. He paused, placing the familiarity of the abbot's face. "You look like a man I know as Emilirdo." "My younger brother," the abbot said. "Does he still insist on explaining that his name stands for agony?" Orn nodded. "That's a small attempt at humor, you know," the abbot said. "His name is really Agada, which refers to the maxims and such in the Talmud. That's a very ancient religious book. You said you were expecting me, Orn said. I normally expect the ones I summon, the abbot said. His eyes seemed to peer through Orn, searching, probing. One skeletal arm lifted, gestured toward a simple chair beside the bed. Please be seated. Forgive me for receiving you in this fashion, but I find myself jealous of my rest in these latter years. You found my brother in good health when last you saw him? Yes, he seemed healthy. Orn crossed to the chair, wondering about the abbot. Something about this frail-appearing and skinny ancient spoke of powers beyond anything Orn had ever before encountered. Deadly forces lay dormant in this room. He glanced around, saw dark hangings on the walls, weird shapes worked upon them, curves and squares, pyramids, swastikas, a repetitive symbol like an anchor fluke. The floor felt cold and hard. Orn looked down, saw black and white tiles in large pentagonal pieces. Each was at least a meter across. Polished wood furniture stood in the shadowy corners. He identified a desk, a low table, chairs, a visorecord rack with lyre sides. Have you summoned your guards? Orn asked, turning his attention back to the abbot. What need have I of guards? The abbot asked. When a thing is guarded, that creates the need for guards. Again the skeletal arm gestured toward the chair. Please be seated. It disturbs me to see you so uncomfortable. Orn studied the chair. It was a spindly thing, without arms to conceal secret bindings. It is just a chair, the abbot said. Orn sat down like a man plunging into cold water, tensed his muscles to leap. Nothing happened. The abbot smiled. You see. Orn wet his lips with his tongue. The air in the room bothered him. It felt deficient to his lungs. Something extremely out of place here. It was not going as he had imagined, but as he reflected upon this, he couldn't think how he had imagined this meeting. It just wasn't right. You have had a very trying time, the abbot said. It was necessary for the most part. But please share my fellow feeling. I well recall how it was for me. Oh? Did you come here to find out some things too? In a sense, the abbot said. In a very real sense. Why are you trying to destroy the IA? Orn blurted. That's what I want to find out. A challenge does not necessarily imply the wish to destroy, the abbot said. Have you deciphered the intent behind your ordeal? Do you know why you cooperated with us in this perilous testing? The large eyes, brown and glossy, peered innocently at Orn. What else could I do? Many things, as you've just demonstrated. All right. I was curious. About what, specifically? Orn felt something quicken within him, lowered his eyes. As he reacted, Orn wondered at himself. What am I hiding? The abbot said, Are you being honest with yourself? Orn swallowed. He felt like a small boy called to account by his schoolmaster. He said, I try to be. I believe I continued because I suspected you might be teaching me things about myself that I didn't already know. Superb, the abbot breathed. But you're a product of the Merakian civilizations and the Nathian, Orn interrupted. To be sure, the abbot said. And this civilization boasts of many techniques for the human to know himself. Reconditioning, sophisticated microsurgical resources, the enforced application of acultural toning. How could there be anything about yourself that you still needed to know? I just knew there was. Why? How? There's always something more we need to know about anything. That's the way it is in an infinite universe. A rare insight, the abbot said. Have you ever been afraid without knowing precisely why? Who hasn't? Indeed, the abbot agreed. You speak the words, but I do not believe you act upon your insight. Ah, if we only had the time to enroll you in the study of thaumaturgical psychiatry and the ancient Christians. Enroll me in what? There were mental sciences long before the techniques developed by your civilization, the abbot said. The Christeros religion preserves many fragments of such techniques. You would find such study valuable. Orn shook his head. This wasn't going the way it should. He felt defensive, outmaneuvered. Yet all he faced was one skinny human in a ridiculous nightshirt. No, Orn corrected himself. He faced much more than that. The sense of power here could not be ignored. The abbot said, Do you really believe you came here to protect your precious IA? To discover if we were fomenting war? That has to be part of the reason, Orn said. And what if you discovered that we were planning a war? What then? Are you the surgeon? Are you prepared to cut out the infection and leave society in its former health? Orn felt a flare of anger which receded as quickly as it had come. Health. The concept bothered him. What was health? All around us, the abbot said, shadowy forces exist. Now and again, they break through the encrusting dimensions, and they coalesce into forms tangible enough that we are aware of them. You are aware of such forces right now. If we view them from the viewpoint of life, some of these forces are healthy, some unhealthy. There are ways in which life can speak to these forces, but our communications do not always produce the results we anticipate. Silently, Orn stared at the abbot, aware with a ringing sense of hollowness that they had embarked on a perilous course. He felt forces surging within him, wild and terrible. The abbot said, Do you not see parallels between the things we have thus far discussed? Orn gulped. Maybe. The best of a supremely mechanistic scientific society weighed you, Orn, and assigned you a niche in its scheme of things. Does that niche fit you? You know it doesn't. Something remained in you, the abbot said, which your civilization could not touch, just as there always remains something which your IA does not touch. Orn felt a lump in his throat, thought of Guiana, of Hamel and Shellop. He said, Sometimes we touch too much. Of course, the abbot agreed. But most of every iceberg remains beneath its sea. Thus it is with Amel. Thus it is with you, with the IA, with every manifestation we can recognize. Again, Orn felt the surge of anger. These are just words, he muttered. Nothing but words. The abbot closed his eyes, sighed. He spoke softly. The Guru Pasawan, who led the Ramakrishnanas into the great unification which we now know as the ecumenical truce, taught the divinity of the soul, the unity of all existence, the oneness of the Godhead, the harmony of all religions, the inexorable flow of eternity. "I've had enough religious pap," Orne snapped. "You forget. I've been through some of your machines. I know how you manipulate the—" "Consider this in the nature of a history lesson," the abbot murmured, opening his glistening eyes to stare at Orne. Orne fell silent, abashed at his emotional outburst. Why had he done that? What pressures were concealed here? The discovery and interpretation of Sai tends to confirm the Guru Pasawan, the abbot said. Thus far, our postulates remain secure. Oh? And Orne wondered at this. Surely the abbot wasn't going to venture a scientific proof of religion. The abbot said, "All of mankind acting together represents a great psi force, an energy system. The temporary words are unimportant because the observable fact remains. Sometimes we call this force religion. Sometimes we invest it with an independent focus of action, which we call God." "Psi focus," Orne blurted. "Emilerdo implied I might be— Well, he said—" "A god?" the abbot asked. Orne saw the old man's hands trembling like leaves on the bed covers. The prescient fear was gone, but he didn't think he enjoyed the surge of internal forces that remained. "That's what he said," Orne agreed. "We have learned," the abbot said, "that a god without discipline faces the same fate in our dimensions as the merest human confronted with the same circumstances. It is unfortunate that humankind has always been so attracted to absolutes, even in our gods." Orne recalled his experience with Bakrish on the hillside, the mob, the psi forces surging from that massed organism of humanity. The abbot said, "You speak with a certain glibness of eternity, of absolutes. Let us turn to finite existence instead. Let us consider a finite system in which a given being, even a god, might exhaust all avenues of knowledge and know everything, as it were." Orne saw the image painted by the abbot's words, blurted. It'd be worse than death. An unutterable and deadly boredom would face such a being, the abbot agreed. The future would be an endless repetition, the replaying of all its old records. It would be, as you say, a boredom worse than extinction. But boredom's a kind of stasis, Orne said. That'd break down somewhere and explode into chaos. And where do we poor finite creatures make our existence? The abbot asked. Surrounded by chaos, Orne said. Immersed in it, the abbot said, his old eyelids fluttering. We live in an infinite system where anything can happen, a place of constant change. Our one absolute? Things change. If anything can happen, Orne said, your hypothetical being could be extinguished. Even a god? Quite a price to pay to escape boredom, huh? The abbot asked. It can't be that simple, Orne protested. And probably isn't, the abbot agreed. Another consciousness exists within us which denies extinction. It has been called such things as collective unconscious, the Paramatman, Urgrund, Sanatana Dharma, Supermind, Ober Paliat. It has been called many things. Words again, Orn objected. The fact that a name exists for something doesn't mean that thing exists. Good, the abbot said. You do not mistake clear reasoning for correct reasoning. You are an empiricist. Have you ever heard the legend of Doubting Thomas? No. Ah, the abbot said. Then a mortal may instruct a god. Thomas is one of my favorite characters. He refused to take crucial facts on faith. He sounds like a wise man. I have always so considered him, the abbot said. He questioned, but he failed to question far enough. Thomas never asked who the gods worship. Orn felt his inner being turn over. One slow evolution. He sensed forces falling into place. Concepts, order, chaos, new relationships. It was an explosion of awareness, a blinding light that illuminated infinity for him. When it passed, he said, You did not instruct Mahmud. We did not, the abbot said, his voice low and sad. Mahmud escaped us. We may generate gods, prophets, but we are not always in a healthy relationship with them. When they point out the pathways to degeneracy and failure, we may not listen. When they indicate the way out of our blindness, veils fall upon our sight. The results are ever the same. Orn spoke, hearing his own voice echo with a terrible resonance in the abbot's room. And even when you follow the way, you achieve only temporary order. You climb toward power and fall into shattering circumstances. An inner light glowed from the abbot's glossy eyes. He said, I pray to you, Orn. Have you any count on the number of helpless innocents tortured and maimed in the name of religion during our bloody history? The number is meaningless, Orn said. Why do religions run wild? The abbot asked. Do you know what happened to me out there tonight? Orn demanded. I knew within minutes of your escape, the abbot said. I pray you not to be angry. Remember, I am the one who summoned you. Orn stared at the abbot, seeing not the flesh, but the forces which came to focus there as though pouring through a torn place in a black curtain. You wanted me to experience and learn the explosive energy within religion, he said. Truly, a mortal may instruct a god. He hesitated. Or a prophet. You please me, Abbot Halmarak. Tears poured from the abbot's eyes. He said, Which are you, Orn? God or prophet? Orn silenced sensory perception, examined the new relationships, then either, or both, or none of these. One has a choice. I accept your challenge. I will not start a wild new religion. Then what will you do? The abbot whispered. Orn turned, waved a hand. A dancing sword of flame came into being about 2 meters from his outstretched hand. He aimed its point at the abbot's head, saw fear glisten in the old eyes. What happened to the first lonely human who tapped this form of energy? Orn demanded. He was burned alive for sorcery, the abbot husked. He did not know how to use the force after calling it into existence. Then it is dangerous to call a force into existence without knowing how to use it, Orn said. Do you know what this particular force was called?
A salamander,
the abbot whispered. Men thought it was a demon with a life of its own, Orn said. But you know more about it than that, don't you, Reverend Abbot?
It's raw energy,
the abbot whispered. He drew in a ragged breath, sank back against his pillows. Orn observed the lapse, infused the abbot with additional energy.
Thank you,
the abbot said. Sometimes I forget my years, but they do not forget me. You forced me to accept the things I already could do, Orn said. I doubted the existence of a superior consciousness which sometimes manifests itself in men, in gods, prophets, and machines. But you gave me the test of faith and forced me to have faith in myself.
It is thus gods are made, the abbot ventured. Orn recalled the old nightmare. Gods are made, not born.
He said, You should have listened to Thomas. Gods do worship. I summoned Mahmud, and Mahmud was not of your making. I caused pain and suffering. In an infinite universe, a god may hate. The old man put his hands over his face, moaned,
Oh, what have we done? What have we done?
Orn said, Sigh must be faced with sigh. By willing it, Orn projected himself into space and alternate dimensions, found a place where psi forces did not distract. Somewhere there was a great howling of non-sound, but he could ignore it. The thought of blazing seconds ticked within him. Time. He juggled symbols like blocks of energy, manipulated energy like discrete signals. Time and tension. Tension equals energy source. Energy plus opposition equals growth of energy. To strengthen a thing, oppose it. Growth of energy plus opposition produces time, produces new identities. Orn whispered soundlessly to time. You become like the worst in what you oppose. Time displayed it for him. The great degenerated into the small. Priest slipped into evil. Somewhere beyond him, Orn sensed chaotic energy flowing. It was a great blankness filled with ceaseless flowing. He felt himself on a mountaintop, and there was a mountaintop beneath him. He pressed the living earth with flattened palms. Thus I have shape, he thought. A voice came to him from below the mountain. He was being pulled down the mountain, distorted, twisted. Orn resisted the distortion, allowed himself to flow toward the voice. Blessed is Orn. Blessed is Orn. It was a persistent chant in the abbot's voice. There were others then. Diana, Stetson. A multitude. Blessed is Orn. Orn saw with senses he created for the purpose, and into dimensions of his own making. Still he sensed the flowing chaos, knowing that even this might not hold him. One had only to make the proper perception. Veils would fall away. Blessed is Orn, the abbot prayed. Orn felt a pang of sympathy for the old man, recognized the awe. It was like Emilerdo's aborted demonstration, a three-dimensional shadow cast into a two-dimensional universe. The abbot existed in a thin layer of time. Life projected the abbot's matter along that thin dimension. The abbot prayed to his god Orn, and Orn answered, coming down from the mountaintop, erasing the worship of the multitudes, coming to rest as a physical form cross-legged and seated upon the bed.
Once again you summon me, Orn said.
You have not said which you choose, the abbot said. God, prophet, or what?
It's interesting, Orn said. You exist within these dimensions, yet outside them. I have seen your thoughts blaze through a lifetime, taking only a second for the journey. When you are threatened, your awareness retreats into no time. You force time almost to a standstill. The abbot still sat propped up in bed, but now he held his hands extended prayerfully. He said,
I pray that you answer my question.
You already know the answer, Orn said.
I?
The abbot's eyes opened wide in surprise. The thin old shanks trembled in the bed. You have known it for thousands of years, Orn said. I have seen this. Before men first ventured into space, some were looking at the universe in the right way and learning to answer such questions. They called it Maya. The tongue was called Sanskrit.
Maya,
the abbot whispered.
I project my consciousness upon the universe.
Life creates its own motive, Orn said. We project our own reason for being, and always ahead of us, the great cataclysm and the great awakening. Always ahead of us, the great burning time from which the phoenix arises. The faith we have is the faith we create.
How does that answer my question? The abbot pleaded.
I choose that which any god would choose, Orn said. And he disappeared from the abbot's bedroom.
As Orn indicated, the prophet who calls forth the dead actually returns the body's matter to a time when it was alive. The man who walks from planet to planet sees time as a specific location. Without time to stretch across it, there is no space. Orn has created our universe as an expanding balloon of irregular dimensions. Thus he accepted my challenge and answered my prayer. We can continue staring at our universe through the symbol grids which we construct. We can continue reading our universe like an old man with his nose pressed against the page. Private report of the abbot Halmerack. In his Merrick office, Tyler Gemin, director of R&R, faced his visitor across an immense blackwood desk. The desk smelled of a perfumed polish. Its wide top held the holographic projection of Gemin's family and a communications console. Behind Gemin, a simul window looked out across the pyramid steps of Merrick's Government Central, a descending line of parks and angular structures glistening under the green light of noon sun. The director was a rounded outline against the simul window, a fat and genial surface with smiling mouth and hard eyes. Frown wrinkles creased his forehead. Let me get this clear, Admiral Stetson, Gemin said. You're telling me that Orn appeared in your office out of nowhere?
Stetson slouched in the shaping chair across from Gemin, eyes almost level with the desktop. It interested him that the polished surface of the desk created an illusion of heat waves which danced across Gemin's chest. That's what I'm telling you, sir, Stetson said.
Like that fellow from Wesson, you mean? A psi thing?
Call it whatever you want, sir. Orn just popped out of nowhere, grinned at me, and delivered that message.
I don't find this flattering at all, Gemin protested. His hard eyes bored into Stetson. Stetson hid amusement under a mask of concern.
Well, sir, there are a lot of us from IA who need jobs now that you've taken over our work. I understand that, Gemin said, his gaze cold and measuring. But I deeply resent the suggestion that R&R has been making dangerous mistakes. There was that unfortunate business on Himmel, sir, Stetson said. Not to mention Guyena and— I am not suggesting we're perfect, Admiral, Gemin said. But our positions now remain pretty clear. The vote in the Assembly was decisive. The IA is no more, and we are— Nothing's really decisive in a final sense, sir, Stetson said. You'd better, kinda go through once more what Orn is saying in that message. His message is plain enough, Gemin said, and I must say it sounds rather far-fetched to suggest that I should take this on faith, and— I say, isn't it getting rather hot in here? Gemin ran a finger around his collar. Without shifting his body, Stetson pointed to the region above Gemin's left ear. The R&R director turned, eyes going wide as his gaze encountered a dancing point of flame hanging in the air. Burning, prickling sensations crawled along his skin. Abruptly, the flame swelled to a ball almost a meter in diameter. Gemin leaped to his feet, knocked over his chair as he stumbled backward. Heat blasted his face. How now? Stetson asked. Gemin dodged to the right, and the flame shot ahead of him, cutting him off. It pressed him toward a corner. All right, Gemin shrieked. I agree. The flame dwindled to a spark, vanished. The way Orn explains it, Stetson said, there's no place in the universe where there hasn't been flame at some time or other. It's just a matter of shifting space and time so the space coincides with the time of fire. As long as we've come to an agreement, you can sit down, sir. I don't think he'll bother you any more unless— Gemin righted his chair, sank into it. Perspiration ran from his face. He stared at Stetson with a stricken expression, said, But you said I was to remain in charge of the department. It was Stetson's turn to scowl. Damn nonsense about hose and handles. What? He says we live in a universe where anything can happen, and that means even war has to be a possibility, Stetson growled. You've read the report. We didn't dare leave a thing out of his message. Gemin glanced fearfully at the area over his left ear, back to Stetson. Quite. He cleared his throat, leaned back, and steepled his hands in front of him. Stetson said, I'm to be attached to your office as a special executive assistant. My duties are to facilitate the absorption of IA into— He hesitated, swallowed. R&R. Yes, of course. Gemin leaned forward, his manner suddenly confidential. Any idea where Orn is now? He said he was going on a honeymoon, Stetson growled. But— Gemin shrugged. I mean, with his powers, with the things he apparently can do, I mean, the Psi thing and all. All I know is what he told me, Stetson said. He said he was going on a honeymoon. He said it was the thing any normal red-blooded man would want to do at a time like this. Once a Psi, always a Psi. Once a god, you can be anything you choose. I give you the proper obeisance, Reverend Abbot, for your kindness and your instruction. Humans get so conditioned to looking at the universe in terms of little labeled pieces, they tend to act as though the universe really were those pieces. The matrix through which we perceive the universe has to be a direct function of that universe. If we distort the matrix, we don't change the universe. We just change our way of seeing it. As I told Stead, it's like a drug habit. If you enforce anything, including peace, you require more and more of that thing to satisfy you. With peace, it's a terrible paradox. You require the contrast of more and more violence as well. Peace comes to those who've developed the sense to perceive it. In gratitude for this, I will keep my promise to you. Humankind has an open-ended account in the bank of time. Anything can still happen. Lewis Orne, to the Abbot Halmerack. P.S. Please record a note that I want this inscription on my tomb. He chose infinity one finite step at a time. We'll call our first son Hal, and let him make up his own joke about what it means. I'm sure Ag will help him. Love, L.O.